right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to call to order the county board meeting for November 7th. Will you please all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have any disclosures of interest this morning? All right, hearing none, we move on. Review and approve the October 17th County Board meeting minutes.
Move approval as presented, Anderson.
Second, Betcher.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from October 17th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, approve the October 19th special session county board meeting minutes.
Move approval, Betcher.
Second, Anderson.
All right, it's moved and seconded to approve the October 19th special session county board meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Review and approve the county board agenda. Any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes, Chair.
I would move to approve the agenda, pulling item 5 off the consent agenda.
We're pulling off number 5. All right, all those in favor? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. All right, number 5 on the consent agenda.
Let's do the consent agenda first without number 5.
Thank you. All right, review and approve the following items on the consent agenda with the exception of number 5. We have all had an opportunity to look those over.
Move approval, Anderson. Second, Grasset.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda with the exception of number 5. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. Number 5, approve the 2024 policing contract with the City of Goodview.
Well, since I'm the one that pulled that off, I'll just start out. I've wrestled with this ever since our committee of the whole, and I just can't get to approving the item with Goodview paying a chunk more than the rest of the ones that were contracted with in the same year. So with that, I would move that we contract at the same rate with Goodview that we do with Pine Island and the city of Winnemingo.
All right, so we have a new motion to change the policing contract. Is there a second? All right, is there one more time, is there a second on changing the police contract? Do I have to ask 3 times?
Usually, yeah.
Okay. Third and final time, is there a second to approve the new motion for the 2024 policing contract with the City of Goodhue? All right, motion fails for lack of a second. So now we go back to approving the 2024 policing contract with the City of Goodhue as written.
So moved, Grasset.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the 2024 policing contract with the City of Goodhue. All those in favor say aye. Whoops.
Nope.
It's discussion.
Need
I'm
discussion
so sorry.
now.
I'm sorry, so sorry.
Until we had a motion on the table, discussion shouldn't happen. Now there's motion on the table, and I will discuss. In our committee of the whole, and I think a lot of you knew that I was not in favor of contracting at a different rate. And as I've measured that, it really is a change to me in a policy change for this board. We have several personnel contracts with cities, with other units of government that we're not looking at like this way. And this is law enforcement. If we're going to look at it this way, are we actually changing the policy and going to look at it for all those contracts? And if so, what are the ramifications of that? And what message does that send to all our local units of government that we want to transfer all those costs over to you when it really benefits all of us to do better together? That's the problem I have with this, because we haven't set any parameters. This is just one piece of it with one city that we've decided this is the route we're going to go, and then we're going to try to move this forward. We have work with our personnel with almost every city in the county, with almost every township in the county, where our personnel are doing work for them, helping them. Some of it, we maybe get most of the dollars back, some of it we don't. And I have a real problem making this decision. If this is a policy going forward, then we haven't had a discussion about the policy. And if that's really what we want to do, then we need to back up and have that discussion. Because one-offing this does not make sense to me. And that is exactly what we're doing. We're doing it one-off because one city lost their police force and came to us and asked for us to work with them. And now because of the timing of that and some comments from this board, we're going down this, I'll call it a rabbit hole, without really having a plan where that takes us. And that's a problem for me. And this contract, if we went back to and contracted with them at the same rate as everybody else, it's $27,256. That's what it is, $27,256, which isn't 0.1% of our budget. It isn't, it's 0.03% of our budget. And without having that longer discussion and going through with this, I just can't do it. My values say we need to have a longer discussion, and we need to actually treat Goodhue like we're treating everybody else moving forward. And they all need to come along together. I'm not against raising the rate. I'm just against raising the rate for one when the rest of them are not. So that's why I can't support it. I won't support it. And I really think, as a board, if it's a policy we're going to go after for our personnel costs, then we need to make that a policy across the board, not just one off it. That's why I can't support it.
All right, I have one question to you, and that is so if someone has a contract for 3 years, if I have a contract for my phone for 3 years, usually they give me some kind of a deal if I'm willing to sign up for 3 years. If I only have a contract for 1 year, I'm usually charged more than if I sign up for 3 years. Therefore, it's my understanding when we were going through this that at the end of next year, when the contracts are up, then everybody goes to the same cost. And therefore, somebody coming in for just the last year is asked to come closer to what's going to be realistic when you didn't come on board 2 years ago for a 3-year contract, though I realized they had their own police department at that point.
And I understand that process that you're using. I totally do. And that's why I said I've wrestled with this for a long time. We have contracts with the cities for attorney's fees. We have contracts with the cities with public works. We have all kinds of contracts that we're out there doing, personnel-wise. Are we saying that in all those instances, we're going to go back and try to figure out exactly every cost and bill it to every city for all of those things? Or are we only doing it for law enforcement? Is that the only one we're concerned about? And we haven't had that discussion, but we're going down that path, and what's the next one that we want off? I have problems with that. If this is a decision this board wants to go with, then buck up and let's go make the decision and have the discussion. If not, you're just doing it one-off, and I have real problems with that because it's different for every city, and different cities contract for different things. We got GIS outside this county. We got GIS within this county. We got all kinds of different contracts out there. Which ones are you going to pick and choose? You're going down a path without a direction and without any parameters on what that path is. And if you want to do that, you have the votes. I get it. Go ahead and do it. But later, you're going to have to come back and have that discussion. And I think you're putting $27,000 out there and causing all of this angst when you could just say, we're going to stick with the rate and have more discussion and figure out as a board just where we want to go, because we don't know right now. I have no clue what the next one that we're going to put forward that we're going to say, oh, we're going to change that contract because we can. I just want to know what it is.
I'll just make a couple comments. I thought Linda's comments were good, and if she had a 3-year contract and 2 years into it, I went to the same company and I wanted to get a contract, they're not going to give me the rate that they gave her 3 years ago. They're going to give me whatever the going rate is now, which might be more and might be less. And so I think that, well, it's true. I mean, I'm not going to get the same deal as someone, even a more bigger example, if somebody had a 10-year contract in year 9, I kind of want to come in and get that deal. I'm not going to get that deal. They're going to look at what the true costs are, and they're going to base my contract on what the true costs are. And I think that's what we're doing, and I think we aren't even going to 100% of true costs in a couple of different ways. Okay, so I think that you don't get the deal that somebody got at the beginning of a contract a few years back. You get what the going cost is now, whether it's buying a car or renting an apartment or whatever, buying health insurance. I do think you're right that we need to have that discussion and that we need to have it as a board. And I think it is an important issue and one we need to look at. And my view, when I think about that, is thinking about board priorities or what the board wants to be looking at the coming year. I think it's a very reasonable thing to put on there. But I think it's very reasonable to expect someone who's asking us to provide new service for us to know what the true costs are and to make a decision about whether or not that true cost should go to the person getting the service or if somebody else should be paying a portion of that true cost. And I think we'll continue to provide the baseline service we were always providing, and now we're asking them to pay the true cost, or near, it's not fully the true cost, but of the additional service they're asking for from the county. So that's my view on it.
And I, like I said, I've wrestled with it.
Yes.
But what I'm really wrestling with is the equity of it, because we're not. So what you're saying is if they'd have came on 3 years ago, they'd be at 58, 55 going into
Yes, I am
next year.
saying that because we would.
But this is a change in philosophy mid-cycle that we haven't vetted out what that change in philosophy is for anything else.
Yeah, I understand what you're
It's just a
saying.
one-off. And if you had 5 examples of what you wanted to do that with, or 10 examples that we could talk about, that's a different story, but it's not. It's just this one.
Well,
I have problems with charging Goodhue
Yeah.
more dollars than I'm charging Wanamingo for the exact same service. Exact same
And I
service.
understand that, but to me, it all has to do with the contract. And then I do think you're right that it's an important discussion that we as a board have. But I think right now we're trying to figure out a 1-year contract for Goodhue and what appears to be reasonable as we have time to work on this bigger issue.
I do understand the setting a precedent, does at times can cause problems. I think this is a 1-year small correction. My county or my township taxpayers don't want to pay this extra money. So I understand it only $27,000, but it's coming from somebody. We have to pay this. These are real costs. And, what's happened in the last 5 years has changed everything in this county. And what's going to happen in the next 5 years, we can run into a whole lot of these things coming in the future. You know, a philosophy is great, but I've seen philosophies change within a few months, you know. I mean, things, I think we've made a small correction. I think we're going the right direction, and yeah, I'm still going to support this.
I've said my piece.
Okay. Jason, anything?
No, just this is specifically this policy and direction of the board was something I was going to bring up later, and I will bring it up later in discussion items. So.
All right, then we are back to approve the 2024 policing contract with the City of Goodhue as it is written. Do we have a motion to accept?
Yeah.
That's right, that's why we're in discussion. All right, it's been a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the 2024 policing contract with the City of Goodhue as it is currently written, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Regular agenda, County Administrator's Report. And we are going to turn that over to Briggs.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. It's an exciting day for me, but I'm just going to kind of give a high-level overview of the memo that's been provided to you in the packet already. That really just details how we got to where we are today. This all started really back in 1990, which is when the county seal was created, which then kind of turned into the de facto county logo, ever since we haven't really had a unified county logo, and so we've really just defaulted to the seal itself. And fun history for you, it was really just created by 2 internal employees, actually, under the request of the County Board of Commissioners, who then merged the designs together, and that became the seal, again, just back in 1990. Then in 2018, there was a discussion over what should be going over the heart on our chest whenever we're putting on some county-branded logos, county-branded swag, excuse me. And a committee of several county employees met and discussed kind of alternatives and potential avenues that we could go down, and they came across with nothing, so kind of just leveled and kind of became subsided. But back earlier this year, in fact, the newly formed Communications Committee, which is made up of a representative from each department as assigned by the respective department heads, kind of recommended to the board that we open up an RFP process to engage and create new county branding. After receiving 12 bids, which we thought was a lot at the time. Since then, we've seen more bids come in for other things. But we decided to move forward with Trajectory, and we approved that contract, and ever since, we've been engaging in that process. The process that Trajectory has laid has been very impressive. They've really showed a dedication to Goodhue County and really wanted to push forward for the best product for Goodhue County. It started with them actually doing an in-person tour. I don't know if you remember back earlier in the summer when we had all that smoke, but they came down from Canada and they brought the smoke with them. And so they got to see Goodhue County as much as they possibly could with the limited visibility. But what they did saw, they were very impressed with. They saw everything that they possibly could from Prairie Island Indian Community, Welch, Hay Creek, Sogan Valley. They saw Cannon Falls. We took them over to Frontenac, and so they saw a lot of Goodhue County, and they were very impressed, and they thought it was just as beautiful as we do every single day. From there, they actually met with the Communications Committee and really did a high-level discussion about what Goodhue County is and kind of where we want to go and kind of what do we want to avoid and those pitfalls that we don't want associated with our brand. From there, we then created a list, internal staff, created a list of 20 people. We asked commissioners and department heads to recommend names to us so that we could kind of do one-on-one interviews with Trajectory and kind of understand what the perceptions are of Goodhue County, but then also understand the perceptions of maybe where we're faltering as well. And I think a lot of people did engage in that process, and they were happy with how those one-on-one interviews went. From there, they created a survey, and that survey we pushed out during the county fair. We had close to 300 respondents, which we were very enthralled with, and those are really just on the brand ingredients and kind of what makes up the brand itself. From there, they then used those brand ingredients to kind of create 10 visual identities. The Communications Committee then narrowed that down to a solid 4, and from there it was pushed out in a secondary survey, which actually received more respondents than the first survey, which we were also very impressed with. I believe it was about 300 plus, I'm forgetting the exact number. From there, they then came back with the top 2 finalists, and they had a discussion with our communications committee about which one really appealed to us and which one really appealed to where we want to go into the future as well. From that discussion, Trajectory put together the recommendations and brought it to our management team on October 23rd, and we had a discussion about kind of the rollout as well as what the recommendations all entail. And from there, we then brought those recommendations back to the county board via a committee of the whole on October 27th to really answer any questions and kind of just get into the details and finer details of it as well. And now those recommendations are back and a little bit more thought out in the brand guidelines that you're seeing today. So I kind of wanted to just go through the brand guidelines a little bit with you and kind of detail what these are. Really, brand guidelines are just kind of the rules that kind of explain how to work with our brand. They're really kind of, for lack of a better phrase, kind of our Bible, if you will. It's just important to follow these guidelines, so it helps with external and internal communications and kind of keep everything consistent to reinforce the quality of our brand. There are some 3 brand pillars that really substantiate who we are as a county. We're naturally inspiring, we are good to grow, and of course, we're for the public good. And all that encapsulates in our central tagline, which is to find your good here. This tagline not only helps with our internal strong mantra for staff to make an impact in Goodhue County residents' lives, but it's also a good recruitment message, and as we know, recruitment is key these days. But it also works through a broad range of departments. It has a positive and future-focused message for citizens, and also it can complement tourism marketing and general marketing as well for Goodhue County as a whole. From there, they've designed a logo, which they're discussing as a visual identity that you see here. And there's really there's like 3 central parts of this logo, which is Nature's Pulse. You can kind of see through the rivers and the bluffs in the top left corner. There are kind of those majestic rivers, dramatic bluffs, and a lush landscape that really cover all of Goodhue County. It's also kind of representative of the heartbeat of service, if you will. As you mentioned earlier, we're for the public good, and so we want people to know that no matter what and no matter where we are working for the betterment of them. And of course, we are connected by nature. I mean, anywhere you go in the county, it's gorgeous, and we have a strong ties to our agricultural roots, but also to the natural landscape itself. This is just a couple of color variations, if you will, of the logo. And a secondary logo that's more horizontal that you'll see in a couple different applications as well. It also details the incorrect usage of the logo, so in that way we're making sure our brand is consistent across all usages. And breaking down how the symbol can be used. I'm particularly a fan of this, if I may say so myself. And of course, including the tagline in our logos as well. And then we also really dipped down and kind of created specific department and service logos, which can help with necessitating internal documents, business cards, and department-specific external communications. Really, it has 14 additional department-specific logos that we're very excited about, and that breaks down almost every department or service that we offer. And of course, the color palette. It includes a dark blue, a water blue, lime green, forest green, and an orange, because we have to have those warm tones in there as well. And our typography, as well as a standard typography that comes with every Word document that you can find. And then it also classifies when and where to use the seal. So I really wanted to touch point on this, which is that the county seal is going to be reserved for official county documents. Those official documents include legal documents, vital records, checks, plaques, and also communications that are coming from the Board of Commissioners. It'll also be used for invitations and printed material, which is again reserved for constitutional offers such as the Board of Commissioners and the county attorney if they so wish. And then really it's just kind of discussing the application. So this is how our business cards will be designed from here on out, as well as our memo templates, which you'll see in all of your board agendas from here on out, and also report templates, and of course PowerPoint templates, because everyone likes a good PowerPoint. So really the staff recommendation is to approve the recommendation that is being made by Trajectory. We also have a representative from Trajectory online if you have any questions you'd like to ask of them. And really, this recommendation is supported by the thorough consultation that's been undergone throughout this entire process. Our current seal, while historic and is a strong, resilient indication of who we are as a county, it was really only made internally, but this logo has been consulted with members of the public, and it's really been crafted by members of the public. And so this is not only a brand that employees can gather around, but also that the public can embrace because they were in on this process. And so we think that this is a great representation of who we are as a county and what we have to offer. So with that, I'll open it up for questions and comments.
I have one question. Do you have a date for rollout yet? Or a tentative date for rollout that you are hoping for?
Yes, so we will be starting to roll this out in January. That'll just kind of give us an extra month to really kind of cross all our T's, dot all of our I's. In our discussion with management team, we had heard that there's a lot happening at the end of the year for employees, and so we don't want to add another really big change on top of that. But it also gives us time to make sure that once we do roll it out, we can do so efficiently and timely, and we can answer people's questions because we've answered those questions for ourselves first as well.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
I have one question about the rollout. So my question is with material that's already out there and printed, like business cards, are we going to use up the business cards we already have? And then when new cards need to be replaced, they'll be done with the new ones? Or is the plan different than that?
No, you're right on the dot. When the state of Minnesota did their rebrand, they decided that they'd do a phased out approach, which is that when the time comes to re-implement something. So an example I could use is for Public Works and their vests. Currently the vests have the seals on them, but we're not going to immediately ditch all of them because that'd be a terrible use of taxpayer money.
Yes,
But
that's
instead, we need
was
to
my
reorder
point.
Some. We'll start slowly reordering them with the new logo. So it'll be a phased approach with some of those kind of more detailed approaches, so like the vests or for, I'm sure there's other examples out there.
And is there any reason to believe the cost of getting this logo on whatever, as the time comes for these things to be replaced, is any more costly than the old logo? I would assume not.
I would
Or the old
assume
seal,
not.
yeah.
Honestly, I don't know the intricacies of it, but I think there could be an argument that the current seal is more hard to print just because it's so intricate.
Yeah.
Plus, it also requires whoever's printing it to do an updated version on their end, since the rendered version we have isn't as scalable as this new one.
Sure, so it shouldn't be more costly, is the real answer. Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions? Is that what you're looking for, a motion to approve?
Yes, it is.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to accept the new logo design. Any other discussion, questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Briggs.
Thank you.
For your information, there are several things that we have had an opportunity to look over. County Board Committee reports. Todd, you had something you wanted to bring up.
Yep, I do want to discuss, I've been still been in contact with Mr. O'Keefe and Lisa Haney regarding the demolition landfill. I still have some questions whether we voted to close the demo part of it. Was it official that, I know it came out on the website, was it official that all those dumpsters get taken out too for the materials? I'm looking at, talking with Lisa too, and I'd like you to come up if you would talk a little bit. If we do take this out, even if we do our zoning, we could be looking at March or April before anything else, even if it's not Glenn, if somebody else opens up, we're going to have several months of not having any service out there. So is there another option that we can keep this going while we're closing the demo landfill? As long as we don't put any more demo in the ground, is there another option is what I'm actually looking for. So Lisa, if you'd kind of go over that.
Good morning, Commissioners. Commissioner Gresseth and I have been emailing with Public Works and with our former solid waste person. And as we talked about before, anything changed kind of ends the non-conforming use. Commissioner Gresseth had a suggestion that if we had dumpsters out there that we still collected the debris, didn't bury it, but then hauled that away, we still continue on with what we're doing until our zoning ordinance gets through. So Public Works and I have been talking too. I mean, I think we're at this point that we need to have a hard answer from MPCA that would still be okay. But if you brought in the containers and kind of continued his business instead of burying it, it would just go away until we get our ordinance done. And again, just confirming in writing from PCA that that's not going to jeopardize our current process of closing the land. Samantha in our office has done a lot of work going through the MPCA rules and going through what other counties are doing. We've got like a sample ordinance already set up. Again, kind of like we talked about, it would be a small contained one. It wouldn't be a major landfill. It would be restricted by basically a permit by rule. So we've got something prepared. We can bring it as a FYI to our next week's meeting to kind of give it to the Planning Commission to just start thinking about it. We could go to January's Planning Commission public hearing. It'd end up going to the first meeting in February for the county board to approve. If it gets passed on from the Planning Commission, which would mean that the first time that somebody could actually apply to do this would be the February meeting, which then again would be a CUP, which would come to the board in March. So that's our quickest timing we can on the zoning, that we can do on the zoning. So at this point, I think it's still a conversation, maybe with Public Works getting a hold of PCA to see if Commissioner Gresseth's option is viable, that it would continue. Now, granted, it sounds like they're only open like 2 days a week during the winter.
Correct.
So if everything came into a line and somebody wanted to apply for a CUP, the soonest they would be able to actually open up would be March if we continue on our zoning path here. And that would be before any construction season really started. So I'm going to pass this one back to Public Works and see if they can contact PCA to see if this is going to jeopardize something. And as we discussed, the whole permit that they have is for demolition of the landfill from PCA. Mm-hmm. And they didn't really, I understand, have a permit to do this other stuff. So people would come in and wanted to bring their demolition in there, and then it would be sorted like, yes, I can put this in the landfill. No, put this over here, we'll get rid of it. So that worked out really well, because people are not going to know until they get there if it can go in a landfill. So this would be an interim thing if we could do this, and if it wouldn't violate anything, that if PCA would be approved, if PCA says no, he needs a new permit, he needs to do all this stuff, then again, we're kind of in the non-conforming situation.
In my conversation with Sherry at the PCA, she said she encouraged anything that we could do to keep it operational, what we were doing. So I think she would be, but I have not had that official conversation with her. I haven't had anything in writing, so I don't know if Jess, if you've talked to her lately or recently, or she was actually the one that tipped us off saying that we're changing the rules, right? Was it
Yes.
Sherry? Yeah.
Yep. So the conversations that we've had with Sherry included discussion around what happens when the demo landfill closes. And the PCA is totally in favor of continuing type of operation, not taking the demolition, but the recycling operation. But there's a necessity to be listed as a PBR if you're over a 40 cubic yard limit and under 120 cubic yards. Anything 40 yards and under, you do not need a PBR. But it's Goodhue County zoning that prohibits that type of land use. So we currently don't have zoning rules that allow for that. And by closing the demolition landfill, and that's currently where we're kind of hung up. We're changing the use. So with that change, all functions cease at that point. The PCA they're totally in favor of us doing something, but our zoning is what's prohibiting us from doing it.
Okay.
If we'd been a little more proactive, or let's say even a year ago, we could have got zoning in place before we did our closing, but things didn't come out that way with the timing on things, so we're going as fast as we can on this.
Yeah. But is there, since let's say we do bring in dumpsters for the demo part of it, does that help us to continue on with our current operation? Like you say, there is no zoning once we don't have the demo landfill.
Our zoning prohibits that type of activity, though.
Right now, we have nothing in the ordinance that allows a transfer station. And we really don't have anything in the ordinance that allows a landfill like that. But it's been there for so long, it was basically grandfathered in. And now it's changed use, it's changing. So this is kind of a finer point that you brought up, is what if we had the dumpsters and we didn't bury it? And that's where I don't know what PCA would say about that, if that continues to keep the permit open, if he would have to do more work with concrete pad down, again, that kind of changes it too. We'll have certain standards that people have to meet, so it's going to be a lot of work for somebody to come in with a proposal. So if there was a break for the winter months to have somebody get their proposal ready, that would probably be a good use of time, but in the meanwhile, like I say.
But I also know is once you close something, it takes a lot to get it back open again. So if we can, in any way, keep that operational, and is there a meeting afterwards today for solid waste?
We have a land use meeting.
Okay.
Probably about a 10-minute land use meeting, or actually a land committee meeting.
Okay. Could we contact PCA and say, do you have any options for us? Or you're saying because we have no zoning, we have no options?
The PCA, like I mentioned earlier, they're in favor of any type of better use for material, whether it's recycled or reused in some other manner. They're not opposed to us doing something. It's just that Goodhue County zoning is prohibiting us from doing it. I would imagine our attorney would maybe weigh in on legal ramifications here for participating in activities that go against our zoning.
Well, probably not in the detail that you're asking, but I mean, I think it's a discussion that we need to have between the departments. Some more discussion. I think Lisa and I have met and talked about it. Haven't had a chance to sit down with Jess and further discuss it with him. So I think this is basically a discussion about ideas and possibilities. That issue with the zoning is a real issue that we're trying to figure out, and I'm not sure if there's a way around that. Obviously, as a government agency, we need to comply with the law. We don't have the option of not complying with the law, and but again, I'm not sure if is there an option to get around it or not. And I think, again, it's something we need to further discuss. And in my mind, one of the other issues was that the PCA needs to weigh in on is whether or not if we did figure out a way to keep it open temporarily, how does that affect the closure and the timing there? Because one of the big issues that they have not weighed in on was at what point do they consider the landfill closed? And if continuing on with this piece of it would somehow delay the actual closure date of the landfill, that could be detrimental to the county, simply because we're trying to move forward quickly because we want to make sure that we get it closed before the new rules take effect. If the board remembers, that was one of the big issues with the new rule changes that are coming forward that could impact the cost of the county for closing it later on. So those are all the kind of underlying issues that we're grappling with, and with multiple agencies involved, it's just hard to get that pinned down.
I don't think PCAs are hold up at all. I think PCA will work with us any which way we can to keep something open. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is we're trying to fast track a change to an ordinance to get to something so that we can continue this service for the public. But we have to follow all of our ordinances to do that. And there's just time constraints to doing that. You know, I totally agree with you. I've had several people call me, and when I explain why we closed it, oh, enough said. I don't need to hear anymore. I understand you're being proactive with county taxpayer dollars. And that's what we are. We are really being proactive. How we find that solution, it really is our zoning ordinance that's going to be hampering it. And how fast we can get that done, and how fast we can get to the point where somebody can apply to do it within our county, I think Lisa's timeline is about as fast as it's going to happen. That's barring that it doesn't get held up through public input that says no, no, no. That would slow the process down. So I think I agree with Todd. I'd love to keep it open. And if there was a way, if we can find a way, because it's Glenn operates it for the county. It's not, we allow Glenn to operate. It's Glenn's operating it for the county. It's our operation, not his. So I think if there's anything around that makes a difference, but I don't think so.
So you kind of know what the zoning timeline is. The big issue outside of that is if PCA would allow something in the interim that looks kind of like what it's doing now, but not burying it.
The PCA is not opposed to operations continuing, and even during the closure process. The plans are the plans to close the demolition landfill if a transfer station option were to be on the table. The plans would accommodate that, and the PCA would sign off on that, and we would still meet all the intent of closure. And we'll be tracking with the PCA very closely on that to ensure that it does close, in that time frame that we're hoping to. So, having a secondary operation on there, they are not concerned about.
Okay, so it'd be nice to get something in writing.
Yeah, I can visit with Sherry. I can visit with Sherry about that. A lot of these demolition landfills, the PCA would prefer that there's a secondary activity on them, and that's due in part to the maintenance thereof. So the PCA in and of itself doesn't have the staffing ability to monitor every single one of these sites that's closed over time, but they do need to ensure, they want to ensure that they're maintained appropriately. So at a minimum, they need to be mowed twice a year. It's pretty simple maintenance, but they would much prefer to see a secondary use that's of higher value. So maybe it's turned into a dog park or a Frisbee park or something like that, where people are there on a routine basis and it's maintained. The big thing is the trees. They want to keep trees off of it because most trees have a relatively deep root structure that over time gets water down into the demolition landfill, which is what we're trying to avoid. So,
If we would have rephrased the way we closed that, if we just said, we're officially closing this in June of '24, but we are no longer taking in material from now till then while we're working on this closure, would that have changed things? I mean, when is it official? Not until it's covered up. And so, I mean, we're still right now just in a working process, correct?
we have to close and not accept any more demolition material at the site so we can get it surveyed so the plans can be developed.
Sure. So wouldn't that be, could it have been reworded and say, we are no longer taking in material? This is it. There's no more. But you are officially calling this thing closed when it's completely covered up and done. It's semantics. I mean, is there a way to?
I just have a question. Aren't things, and haven't they been transferred from that site for a long time?
Glenn was removing material from demolition, and he was accepting other material that was coming in and transferring it out.
So he was maybe doing that without was not within the ordinance when he was doing that?
Not within his current operating permit.
That was not within the PCA permit. Their permit, my understanding was that he could bury demolition. I think people were bringing in their trailers full of their project.
Right.
And he would sort through and say, I can't bury that, so put that over here, and then that stuff got sent to the.
Got transferred.
And I think that evolved into, now there's a semi that comes and gets refrigerators, someone that gets tires, one that gets metal, one that gets electronics, you know, so it's definitely evolved. I mean, there is no official, you know, are we in non-conforming use or something, or, so, yeah, it really has not been operating under an official transfer station
Right.
at all.
It's been doing the activity that you're requesting that
Yeah.
it continue to do. It's not a new activity.
Correct.
I understand that.
Would it make a difference if we did I mean,
Is that regardless of how you worded it, the primary function of the demolition landfill was to receive demolition material, and if we're stopping that, that non-conforming use goes away, and we need to take a look at the zoning.
yeah.
So I think maybe the question ends up going to Mr. O'Keefe if there's any way around this or if there is not. And he
Right.
probably needs some time to take a look at that.
Okay, you got 2 days.
Well, maybe till December 7th, does he?
Well, I think it's the 19th that officially closes, correct?
And I think if we get some answers from PCA, that'll be helpful for.
But I think PCA is going to, like we said, they're going to go along with it. They're happy to do this. This is us, I believe, because we are, you know, it's our zoning that's holding us up now. And if we can well, like I said, I guess you're right. If we can contact PCA and say, what if we had the wording this way? Would it change anything on this closing? You know,
That would help us back up our decision if we get something in writing from PCA about some minor points.
And really, you'd be continuing temporarily one aspect of what's been happening there.
One aspect, and currently, like I say, their permit is for the.
I understand, but they've been doing it for probably many years. Yeah.
The language that we used was to approve hiring SEH to begin designing the closure plan, terminate the operations agreement, and discuss mutually agreeable terms with Mr. Steberg to effectively terminate the landowner agreement and to direct staff to prepare a committee of the whole presentation on the pros and cons of allowing a small, less than 120 cubic yard permit by rule demolition landfill in the county zoning ordinance. So we're following along with what we passed. We had to terminate the agreement. Could we enter into a temporary agreement that carried it out farther with an end date? That's where we have to go, because we have followed everything we needed to do to terminate the operations agreement, which was what we needed to do to get to be able to start closing it. So we would have to go back and create a short-term agreement to operate over a temporary period of time.
But there again, the operations agreement that ended was to receive demolition material.
Was
at
the one that
landfill.
made it work under zoning because it was in place. I agree, that's the slippery slope.
So a temporary one you still wouldn't be able to receive demolition material, so it's still a change in land use, which ends at non-conforming use, which gets back to our zoning conundrum.
It has to be resolved in zoning.
Yes.
But if you do,
PCA, it's not, it's really, our zoning ordinance is preventing us from doing it.
Any other comments?
anybody comes up with any ideas in the next week, please. This is a huge deal in our part of the county, so. And I think it also gives more time to, because it happened in a 2-month period or whenever we noticed, now it's going to give, and not just Glenn, it'll give anybody a chance to look at this and get prepared and, to, if they do choose to want to do a transfer station. So anything we can do is much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. New or old business?
Wait, I have one other.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Committee report. The LEC meetings have been going on for a few months, and we have a meeting the day before our next county board meeting. And I just wanted to give you guys a little background information. If it's too much information, you can tell me that. But we started out with a space study and found out that Goodhue County was using 55% of the space, and City of Red Wing was using 45% of the space. And so what we did is we first started looking just at the costs of things like the telephone, the heat, the water, the custodial service, everything like that. And their monthly costs vary from year to year based on inflation and based on a few other things. But the yearly costs last year were $220-some thousand, right around $220,000. We were charging them $155,000. When we built that building, the total cost of building that building was $16 million, just under, very close to $16 million. And if we look at everything the city's paid, including the $1 million they paid when the building was built that covered the first 15 years of rent, they've paid just under $3 million total, okay, out of that initial $16 million cost and 45% of the value. Okay. So the city agrees that they're paying too little. There's no question about that. And what the debate really has been is about, should they just be paying the cost of their part of the heat and the electricity and the water, or should they be paying something for the space as well, okay? And so what we were looking at for next year was a $300,000 charge, which is a very significant increase from $155,000. It does cover their costs plus a little bit for the space, okay? And Scott, I think that's about $5 a square foot. Am I right about that? And the proposal, as it was sitting from the county's end at our last meeting, was $300,000 for the first year, $350,000 for the second year. And then I don't know that Todd and I were seeing eye to eye on the year after that. And I was sort of feeling like, boy, that's a pretty big increase. And I think Todd was really feeling like we should get to market, which would be more like $450,000. Okay. And so the city, and then with that space study, with the space study, one of the things we found out is there really isn't going to be enough space for the police department and the sheriff's department a decade from now. Okay, that we're going to be out of space. So then we were talking about different ways that that can be handled. And the city is currently, or was planning on doing a space study of the Anna Dees building and whether or not that would provide the space they needed for a police department. And we've talked about some different ways we could do some additions to that building and would have to figure out the costs. And then I said the question I most commonly get is, well, why can't we use some of the jail space of the portion of the jail that's not being used? And I think Scott agreed that we should at least have somebody weigh in on whether or not that space would be usable, okay? Does that cover it fairly well?
Basically, we started with 4 different options.
Yeah.
The 4th option actually is the one I'm leaning towards, is for Red Wing to research their own property. I know our sheriffs, we already have 3 offices, I believe, out in Public Works. We're looking at trying to conform, to bring at least 2 of those back, if not all 3. We're going to be out of space, and I think it's just, this is the future, and I think Red Wing sees it also, the city council, and we're, it is a lot of money, but we have to be fiscally responsible and manage that also for our county
Well, and
taxpayers.
I had some issue with charging more than just what it cost, and it's partially how I think about things, and that's where I was kind of struggling with that. But I do understand that if you've been using an initial cost 16,000 building for, what, 25 years? Is that about right? 24. And have only paid 3 million out of that 16, that, of course, that we haven't been probably doing the right by the county. And so it's not that I think there's any issue with the 300 or even the 350, but when we're getting up to 450, I start really wondering if that's the right move. So anyway, that's where the discussions are at, and I think either Todd or I, or probably you, Scott, as well, would be happy to take any questions from the other commissioners if they have them.
They do want to get a meeting together, the boards together, right?
Well,
A
they
joint one.
did, but then they kind of backed off on that. And one of the reasons they backed off on it was because we didn't, we felt everybody needed to be informed and updated, and we wanted a meeting like that to be productive and solution-focused and not a finger-pointing kind of blaming kind of meeting. So anyway, I'm interested in what you guys are thinking or what questions you have, or from the kind of snapshot I gave, kind of what your reaction is. You.
Yes, sorry.
If I could just add a couple things, Chair. Commissioner Betcher had brought up the fact of her question about using the jail, and so we have, Sheriff's staff has looked into that, and they also have talked to Vaughn, and he's going to have a write-up, and I think that's going to be like option 6. And I believe there's also going to be, he's also going to look at option 5, which would be the Sheriff's Department occupying the main floor and the second floor, and then the jail, City of Red Wing occupying the lower level. So those are more things that will be coming. I will also, just as a point of information, when Commissioner Betcher references the $450,000 number, earlier on in this process, we had done some research and found that, a number of $30 an hour was one that's common.
30 a square foot.
$30 a square foot, yeah, sorry. I was in my policing mode, so anyways, so $30 a square foot was common. We found that earlier on. Now, recently, we've also found out that what the the county of Olmsted charges for their leaseholders is also $30 a square foot for interior office space. So I don't think that that's out of line for a goal to get to. And that would be that $450,000 number.
But what we're trying, what I think the 2-year contract will do, will buy a little bit of time for the city and the county to decide where they want to go from there and what the options are. I don't think we're going to have that solved by the December 7th meeting.
And I know they want a 2-year with a third year for an extension too, so we're potentially looking at 3 years, and I'm not sure if our, Sheriff's Department is, it's cramped. It's tight there. So, I don't know if we give them the 1 year with a 1-year extension, is that not enough time? They're saying they need more time for their surveys and their.
I understood that per the agreement, there were 2-year extensions. I'm not sure, Scott, if I'm understanding that correctly or not.
Per the agreement, it says that we can, which you could always amend the agreement, but we could do 2-year extensions. But with the 2-year extension, you also have to have the time for that we'd give them notice to vacate if we were doing that. And we did agree earlier on in this process that the current, I think it's 90 days or 60 days, and there is not reasonable, and we agreed that 1 year would be more reasonable. So essentially, a 2-year agreement with a 1-year notice becomes a 3-year agreement. So in my eyes, I do think when we get back together with them, we need to talk a little bit about if they are still there 3 years from now, what that number is.
Right.
Just
Okay. No, I
so we
understand
don't
that.
have another year long of doing what we're doing.
I understand
Because it's been
that,
so
too.
much fun.
Yeah.
The chief deputy, and I don't know what you call it, if it's the assistant to the chief of police, they were going to try to work together and figure out a way to get the 3 sheriff department officers into the building.
Yep, and some of that's already been done.
All right, thank you.
I do have a question for you, and that is when You were talking about the utilities of 220,000 and or more, and then square footage. So is the capital costs added in there somewhere? Is that part of square footage? Does square footage cover utilities? How does that work?
And I
I
think,
think Mr. Dowling is probably best to answer that question.
Yes, we looked at this a couple different ways. If we get up to the $30 per square foot, obviously that's going to cover, we would be charging an implied rent in that because we would be collecting more than the capital costs in the utilities. The capital cost is average replacement over the next 5 years. Historically, we haven't been charging nearly enough. So this is just to try and get us up to where we should be charging for market rate.
Okay.
To answer your question, though, too, a little bit more, yeah, we did include capital costs and some future capital costs of things that we know need to be replaced in the building. And utilities were also included in that as well. So that brings us up to our $220,000. And then, again, the additional rent would be included that we would use for maintenance as well.
All right, thank you. Yes.
When you look at that we bonded for that building, and for 16 million, as you stated, the 3 million that we've gotten hasn't covered the interest. Hasn't even started to cover the interest. The interest was probably twice that or more.
That's their expenses and their initial put in.
Yeah, so that doesn't even cover any of
Right,
that.
so-
So they're severely under for several years, and that's fine. That was this board, the boards in the past, and this board's decisions. We're looking at it now. You know, is $30 a square foot the right number? I think that's what we really need to figure out, where we need to go with that. And is there interest? I mean, if we're going to run out of space, we got to figure that out. We have to take care of our space first. We can't build space for other people. If having them connected to the sheriff's office is of value to both units, then what are the options to add more space? And is the city willing to add the space, even if it's on our site? Is that another option? Has that even been talked about? That they would add the space to be in that site? Or would they just want to be totally away?
well, so far, when there's been discussion about adding space, the city was assuming that the county would bear that responsibility, which is one of the things, because we were looking for the dispatch and for emergency operation room?
Yeah, training.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And we didn't feel like the county wanted to take on another multi-million-dollar project when we had enough space for ourselves, and that we would need to find a way where they would be covering those costs.
And that, I understand that, but by the same token, if it was the city that bore the cost
Right,
of
if they
building
would,
it
if they
on
would.
our site,
Yes,
I'm not opposed to thinking about that.
I'm not either,
But I'm not going to build a building
for the
as
city.
a county for the city to use
I understand that, too.
unless
I think we're
unless
in
they
a-
pay the bond payment. That's exactly where I'm at.
I think
but-
we're in agreement with
Yeah,
that.
so
Yeah.
I wouldn't throw that out. It
No.
may still be the best option if they look at other options.
Right, and they have to find out what it's going to cost them so they know what they're comparing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think we are kind of landlocked around the LEC to get enough of a building to build, in between. We got so many utility issues and, there's a lot of moving parts in building the new. They do have an existing building that they're going to have a engineer go in and look at. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now.
And what do you guys think about the 300 and the 350 for year 1 and 2 of this contract? Given that it's 155 right now, And they're basically saying that we have them over a barrel and they'll have to pay what we think is reasonable. I mean, basically, that's what they're saying.
Well, I would personally say we're not trying to recoup
No.
decisions of past boards. That's not it. But we do need to cover, facilities to me are totally different than personnel. You need to cover your costs and what upkeep and everything is. So I'm not opposed to 3 and 350 and then work up from there. But, to your comment about space, you're assuming that a building has to be built to the ground, and I'm assuming it doesn't, because you can build over the parking lot and have a covered parking lot with the building over it. We can do that and not lose any parking lot and not lose any space that way. There's all kinds of options when you start looking at it. They're maybe not the cheapest, but there are options. Sounds like more to come.
Right.
Great
Thank you.
comment. Anything else? Yes.
I'll just note, so after our November 20th meeting, we do plan to have a committee of the whole on December 7th, so we can show the whole board the study, and we'll have an update on our meeting from the 20th on that day as well.
It does sound like an extremely complicated issue. Can we have enough time at the committee of the whole so that we can truly discuss it?
We plan to do that.
It's an evening meeting. We can go till midnight.
All right, there you go. All right, any other comments? All right. Review and approve county claims.
1 second, you have to go
Oh.
to doing old business. Just comment from previous and further. We initially talked about finding the actual true cost of, it kind of spurred, I've been asking for it for a while, or spurred with the sheriff's department. I thought the consensus we had was to find the actual true cost or more accurate cost for every employee throughout Goodhue County. So that included the sheriff's department, land use, public works. Not everybody's going to go out and be doing that. We have to worry about their hourly wage. But my assessment was we're going to find that actual cost for the employees throughout the whole county. Was it not? Am I mistaken? You, Todd, you and Linda were on the personnel portion of the committee that discussed it with the sheriff's department. I know I asked about it, and you said they kind of stopped there. You didn't go any farther. Were we not going any farther to find the true cost of everybody, or is that not the understanding that people had? That we were going to look at every employee?
I don't recall that we were going to look at every employee for every service. I do know that it was referenced when we talked about finding out true costs, that particularly on this one, we were going to find out the true costs for policing contracts. And then I know one of the things I referenced is that we're going to keep track of our time, so we know how much it costs us just to find out how much true costs also costs. Because just as an example, 3, 6, I mean, there's 10 hours of 6 people's time, and that's without any prep. And just my quick calculation on figuring out the true costs of this policing. And so it's going to be expensive to figure out the true cost of everything we do. And I know where you're going, but you look at some of the things we do in land use. I mean, are we going down the road that we're going to find out every single cost of everything we provide to different parties throughout the county? Because there's a lot of things we do. We are the biggest organization in the county.
No, I guess my thought was that we were able to look at ones who we do bill out, and I'll use Public Works as an example. I just re-looked at an old email that we had. So they do their night sign study. Okay, so they drive around 2023 and say this sign reflects, this one doesn't. They make this assessment of how much it costs based on individual paying $30 an hour, whatever it is, wages, vehicle, benefits. Well, that's not accurate because there's a whole lot more that goes into that hourly wage for that individual. So if their sign study says, well, it only costs us $4,000, did it? No, it probably cost maybe $5,000 because of I don't think it's that hard to figure out when you look at the overall cost. And that's my assessment is if we're not having that consensus to go through and to say, you got union employees, you got the whole HR, IT, all this stuff, overall, there's an additional cost, not just hourly wage and benefits, to having these employees out moving around and doing what they're doing. That's one example. a lot of public works does a lot of stuff that they need to be able to look at and say, does it really cost our guys $150, $200 an hour to go out and grade this gravel road as opposed to hiring an outside contractor to grade the road? Do they know an accurate cost? No, they don't. That's what I was hoping that we'd get to, and I don't think it's gonna take thousands of man hours. We look at the policing contract, and I guess honestly, probably could have told you it was gonna be $100 an hour that it costs to run these things in probably 10 minutes worth of looking at the policing budget. But yes, that's throwing a number out there, but I'm just saying, that was my understanding when we had this. If the rest of the board's not on board with that consensus that we had, that identified, I would like to have everybody see a more accurate hourly cost of employees that, and again, it's public works, land use are the ones I mainly think of that are out doing services that can be performed in the private sector that would be more helpful for them to know an accurate cost.
So you want to understand if it's a better use of the taxpayer dollars to have them do it, or the farmer who lives nearby to want to do it, but whatever.
Roughly saying, so they have a better dollar amount when they're factoring in some of these
Yeah,
costs.
I
of what it
understand
really
that.
costs.
And then, and I think when we contract out services or when we take people in, it's helpful for the board to know if that's costing us, if it's break even or we're making money, like the attorney contracts. It's helpful to know that. And I think important, at least to know it, and then we can make what decision we want to. But how can we make good decisions if we don't have factual information about what the costs actually are?
Sure.
Yes.
So yeah, if it's board consensus on certain services or all services, I mean, at some point, you might even want to just have a committee of the whole on that topic. Just as a point of information, when I mentioned the staff hours just in meetings, and I'm just assuming $100 an hour here, we're at $4,800 just for the people that were involved in that, just sitting in meetings, and that doesn't include any prep time. And I know Lucas didn't just all of a sudden come along with the spreadsheet that got all the costs in it, and Christine didn't either. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had 10 grand into figuring out how much it costs for an hour of policing. I mean, I've asked the staff to give me their hours, but I'll be surprised if it's much less than 10 grand. And that's quite a bit of money.
Linda and I are going to end up in a land committee meeting that was supposed to start at 9:30. And in that land committee, every meeting we have is, for an hour, is about $800 to $1,000 in staff dollars. Every time. And we've had 8 or 9 of them on one subject.
Quite a few, yes. And that has been a discussion.
It mounts up really fast when you start asking for accurate information. If you want just ballpark information, then you're not asking the right question.
But I would also concur that if we do not know the true program costs of anything that we do, then how can we make the best decision as to whether or not does it make more sense for us as the county and personnel to do it, or to contract something out to someone else? So even not charging someone for a true program cost, it still seems logical that you've got to know what it is.
I guess I'd be okay with ballparks, there are situations where we have, our townships are out there plowing and they're driving, they turn and they go down the county road, gravel road anyway. I mean, is that a efficiency where we can say, okay, well, why don't you just grade that while you're going there or plow that while you're going there because he's going to the next section? I mean, is there, there are different efficiencies that we can have, and if we know our costs, we can, we can approach those with some backing. Clear as mud. Yeah.
Clear as mud. I guess I also
We
thought
can
we
bring
were
it up for
under
our,
the
near
understanding.
the end of the year workshop might be more of a better discussion point for it. So.
Be a better committee of the whole one, yes.
Yeah, that's a good idea, and that by then I'll have the numbers estimated as far as what this one scenario did cost us to figure out.
Well, and as Commissioner Anderson said, we've got one with land use management, where truly if we collected all the amount of money in a fine to fix something that the county did not, it was not the county's error, but I mean, that is a huge amount of money the county taxpayers are paying. But if we don't know that number, then we can't do anything with it.
And that's an issue where you couldn't farm that out to the private sector.
No, that part's very true.
That is what government does, what the private sector is not good at doing, or won't do, at a reasonable cost.
Yes.
Almost every contract we do, whether it's with SEH for figuring out how to close this landfill, if we had this person on staff with the smarts to do that, it would cost us less, absolutely cost us less. Because SEH is trying to make money in it. We're not trying to make any money. We're just trying to cover our costs. And they pay more than we do, so how can they do it cheaper?
All right, any other comments about this?
Yeah, I play around with numbers all the time, so I was just taking a look at what I had, and the statewide average for what they charged for services was 7.4% of their overall budget, and Goodhue County was 4.3%. And so it's 3% of the $81 million, which is quite a bit. And I'm not saying we should do that, but I think it's important that we be aware that how we're doing it, or at least what we're charging for fees and services is quite a bit less than the statewide average. Again, I'm not saying that means we should increase it, but I think we should be aware that we're putting, for property taxes, Goodhue County, it's 53.4% of our of our total budget comes from property taxes, so 53%, and the statewide average is 43%. And maybe that's what we want. But maybe we should look at how we're different, why we're different, and if that's what we want to continue doing. And again, maybe we do, but I think if we're not aware of the fact that we're doing it differently, how do we make any decisions about it? So that would be for the meeting, too.
All right. Review and approve county claims.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve county claims. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Done seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.